We just did 4.5 hours of continuous conversation about history and politics. Myself and Mohammed. Mohammed is on Patreon as Mohammed Socrates, is his screen name. So conversation that covered China, Japan, the Middle East, Europe, history of a large part of the world. And, you know, Mohammed and I have a lot in common. We have a lot to talk about. I think one of the differences between us, really, okay, if we're being all the way real, all the way honest, which I tend to be on this channel, I'd say one of the differences is why we got involved with veganism in the first place, and then our political attitude towards veganism now in the 21st century. Now, that's going to change. My attitudes towards vegan activism are changing and are going to continue to change in the year ahead. What I do and what I aspire to do and how I do it. I think it would be fair to say you got involved initially due to health, bodybuilding. Yeah.
This was the initial driving motivation, but later it developed into I also learned about the philosophical and moral, environmental aspects of veganism, and they helped me like stick to it long term.
Right.
But yeah, initially I didn't give a shit about animals. Like initially,
right.
I was just too ignorant about the industry and too apathetic toward like the suffering of animals to care.
Right.
And it was basically a selfish motivation at first.
I think though it would also be fair to say that you, like many vegans, become radicalized and become politicized as soon as you see the struggle within your own family, within your own city, just to get vegan food, just to eat, right? It was amazing. You know, you mentioned various relatives. You have one relative who's also vegan, but you have other relatives who kind of sort of adopt a part-time vegan diet, but won't really commit to doing it all the time. But I mean, just the struggle to eat, you know, just the struggle of food, it leads you to see more of a social dimension, because you got to ask, why is it so hard for me to get food?
Yeah, I think that played a role, but for me it was mostly the moment I noticed and I realized that it wasn't necessary to consume and eat meat, that we don't need it to be healthy. Then I realized, okay, like there arises a moral dilemma. Like if it's not necessary, why would we do such a thing? And after that, I started to consider the moral dimensions of the question. Before that, I didn't even consider it because I thought, okay, it's necessary. I need it to stay healthy. I never really questioned it. And as soon as I realized, okay, like health-wise, there is actually no argument for eating meat, then the other dimensions start being relevant.
But I would just say, I think moving beyond the idea of veganism as something you do as an isolated individual to having more of a social and political aspiration to transform the people around you. Yeah. For me, my daughter lives in France and goes to school in France. And in theory, all children in France are forced to eat meat at school. So every parent in France gets politicized. They get radicalized because they have to fight the school authorities on this one way or another and come to a compromise and either say they're a member of a religious group. They have to get a kind of written exception. So I think that these kind of struggles and experiences, for people who maybe start out as just a health-based vegan, I think this also kind of tends to snowball into more of a nationwide and worldwide awareness of the struggle to get vegans organized as a movement group.
Yeah.
Go on, yeah.
I think that's especially true if you live in a society that's very hostile to veganism.
Right.
Not necessarily if I live in Germany, for example, where it's a lot more comfortable than in Jordan, where I was. Yeah, there you definitely get to face the reality of and hardships of like the day-to-day hardships of being vegan in such a society that's very hostile to even vegetarianism, let alone veganism. But I was still not very politicized yet.
Yeah.
I always thought that there were a lot of other human causes that were more worthy of my like efforts. I always hesitated to just like dedicate my whole life to a cause that pertains only to animals, and like I realize now that was a wrong view to take, but that was holding me back all the time from like completely dedicating my life and all my efforts to the cause like of the animals. Of course, there are a lot of human and environmental dimensions.
No, but I understand. I understand. I mean,
I always had this like a hesitation and well, I wasn't quite sure like what was more worthy of my like dedication, my life.
But I mean, if I had been born in another generation, if you were in the middle of World War II fighting a war on a huge scale, would these questions even occur to you? You know, I can say honestly for myself, if I imagine myself living in those political conditions, probably not. Yeah. And for a lot of people, whether you're in Jordan or Syria or even Cambodia or something, a lot of people are preoccupied with political conditions in war and peace that make veganism seem like a trivial question. But yeah, the hostility of the culture around you towards veganism, you only know that after you become vegan. After you start raising your own child vegan. Like, you wouldn't know that. Like, how hostile are French people toward a parent who wants to give their kid an all-vegan diet? You find out after, right? You don't find out before. Like, I'm considering becoming vegan. I'm going to look at this. You find that out through experience. And I think, I mean, a culture like Jordan, I even saw it in Cambodia too. Apart from the religious dimensions and just misconceptions about health, the sense of, if I have enough money to eat meat as social status, meat as celebration, meat as symbolizing generosity and hospitality, or there can just be these kinds of values so built into, the culture of meat. There's a lot of coercion and suasion and stuff. So even in just fighting against that and resisting that, you get politicized, I think, and it's inevitable. You're someone who just cares a lot about politics. So you're going to think of politics of vegans.
You get extremely socially isolated. That's another option you have. Either you isolate yourself or you get active,
or both.
Yeah,
it can be both.
but it's hard to affect any change if you're socially isolated. You have
That's
to.
Right.
You have to really get into social life.
This is the main leitmotif of my channel in 2018, and I hope it's not in 2019. But yeah. So I got a question from a viewer. I'm going to read out my first reply to that, and then open the floor if you want to comment further. Melissa, if you want to comment, I can swivel the camera. Melissa's here, but she's off camera. So my reply is already kind of trenchant and provocative enough that it kind of speaks for itself and gives you something to talk about. But I do actually have a couple notes further, because the person who wrote to me asking for advice, he did send me a further reply to this. So I wrote, there is a major implicit problem in your email. I'm starting here. You're going to figure out what it is we're talking about soon enough. There's a major implicit problem in your email. 1, you say that you have no job, no current career path or ambition. That's fine. That's not a problem in itself. 2, you then talk about vegan activism. 3, is the point implicitly that you want number 2 to become a substitute for number 1? Do you want to try to make vegan activism your source of income and your primary and only career? So there's a question being asked to me about being or becoming a vegan activist from someone who disclaims that he currently has no job, lives with his parents, doesn't have much money to speak of, and so on, right? So I proceed. Many, many times when I did humanitarian work, people asked me for advice in a parallel manner, but without really admitting the implicit premise of the thing, without admitting what it is they're really asking. They would say something like, 0.00, hey, you've lived in Cambodia or Laos. You know all about living and working there. 1, I have no skills, no job, no career, no money, nothing I can offer, nothing I can do to help anyone. 2, therefore, I should be able to move to Cambodia or Laos or some other poverty-stricken country and earn a good living that would provide me with a quality of life much higher than a rice farmer living in that same country. So a higher quality of life than someone who owns farmland, probably owns some farming equipment or machinery, and who has skills to do that job, even if those skills were learned from their grandparents, not in a college, right? I mean, the point being, I would say, I can't even say this for Jordan. The level of poverty in Jordan is probably quite moderate compared to Laos and Cambodia at that time. There's really extreme poverty there. But if you see the quality of life a landowner has in the agricultural economy, and you're showing up with no job skills, no qualifications, and you think I'm going to live at a higher quality, I'm going to live like I'm in California or something, I'm going to live like a Western middle-class person, by doing charity work, by doing humanitarian work, there's a really deep contradiction in this. So I'm saying there's a similar contradiction in talking about vegan activism this way. In talking about activism at all, as a career, or even as part of your career, even as a hobby, there's a real misconception here. Okay, if you are already a plumber, you can go to a refugee camp and do plumbing. Really, water and sanitation is a huge problem on refugee camps most of the time. I actually did know one guy face-to-face who did exactly this. He was a plumber, and every vacation he had, I forget, he was a plumber somewhere in Europe, he would go on vacation and do plumbing on refugee camps. You can imagine. So sometimes they were in the Middle East, sometimes in Asia, and so on. Yeah, interesting role in life. If you're already a dentist, you can go to Laos or Cambodia to do dentistry. But guess what? You'll be making a financial sacrifice to do so, and you'll live in terrible conditions with zero income or near zero income, or possibly even the agency that employs you will want you to donate money to the agency just so you can have the opportunity to work. Where you are paying to work, you're not being paid as an employee. And when you think about it, a lot of this is built into the basic premise of humanitarian work in a sort of unstated way. I have an anecdote here. I'm just going to summarize it more briefly. I knew this couple, so they were an older, retired couple, and even though they had decades of experience living and working in Asia, and they had a lot of experience connected to humanitarian charity work, they had some experience connected to that kind of work, they put themselves in this ridiculous position by setting up a volunteer position and assuming they'd actually pay for their retirement. They'd be earning a significant amount of money out of this. And it was ridiculous. They were putting themselves into a situation where they had no skills. They wanted to be English language editors, and in Sri Lanka, in a situation where there was no money for anyone to get paid for doing this kind of volunteer work. And it's like one of the situations. Well, did you think about what the word volunteer means? You think about what helping people poorer than yourself means. Like, if you just think about it, you can't expect the poor people you're helping to be paying for you to retire. It doesn't make sense. And that it still doesn't make sense if you're a dentist or a medical surgeon. Even they can't demand this or expect this. They have to be doing this as sacrifice. So what about you? We're coming back to vegan activism. It's an allegory, people. It's an allegory that comes really close. All right? So I say in brief, I actually have known many people face-to-face with their lives were really badly damaged by this kind of misconception, their involvement in humanitarian and nonprofit work, despite the fact that they had some level of intelligence and experience in that same area of work. So, we return to your question about vegan activism. Even if you were writing to me as a medical doctor and a fully qualified heart surgeon, how positive could the advice that I give you possibly be? What if I know someone who's a surgeon already and they say, hey, I want to do vegan activism? I'm probably going to be mostly giving them very negative warning advice. So I say here, quote, yeah, well, if you quit your practice as a surgeon to be a full-time vegan activist, that's going to be a disaster, close quote. Sure, you hear about a small number of heart surgeons who become prominent as vegan advocates and activists. How many of them actually pay for their rent from their income as vegan activists? The answer may be zero. Just pause here. This isn't in the letter, but we know a lot of the vegan activists have criticized people like James Aspey. James Aspey only started accepting donations on Patreon very recently. In his life story, he seems to have been born wealthy and to be using his own money. And I'm not criticizing that, but it would be really false to look at James Aspey as a vegan activist and say, oh, you can make money and go on vacation and swim in the beach in Bali. This is not a business model. And not even for the heart surgeons, not even for the people who are dietitians and surgeons. And we know that dietitian, I won't say her name, She was trying very hard to earn a living as a vegan activist dietitian, fully qualified dietitian. And it's a struggle. It's fundamentally very hard to justify earning money out of charity of any kind. So that's what I'm getting at here. Okay, I continue my letter. And you're not a heart surgeon, and you're not a dentist, and you're not a plumber. Veganism is much, much worse than Laos. If you fly to Laos and just join in, a lot of people will be happy to have your company. If you have zero skills and just start learning the Laotian language, I could say that you might have 10 good years just trying to help out in Laos, even if you can't do anything more useful than helping to repaint a barn. Why? People are just generally positive, cheery, and cooperative there. Guess what? Vegans are not. If I had spent the last 5 years contributing to Laotian and Isan ecology, so that's an area, Laos and Isan, on two sides of a border, not worth describing. If I had spent the last 5 years contributing to ecology there, meaning rice farming, etc., how many friends and colleagues do you think I'd now have? Admittedly, most of those friendships would require me to drink alcohol and eat meat, things I refuse to do, but trust me, Laotian-speaking ecology is a really warm and open scene, including ecotourism, etc., where you, with zero skills, could have a good life in the next 5 to 10 years. Vegan activism is not even if you're a heart surgeon, not even if you're an architect. So that's the end of the letter. I then say, look, this is not a mic drop ending to the conversation. If you have something else to say back, to challenge me or disagree, or you want to talk about it from your perspective, you can go ahead, and maybe something unexpected is gonna come from there in terms of the conclusion. And now also I open this to the floor. So Melissa, you have some you're already familiar with where this was going, but yeah.
Like I was wondering if you could have done better with your diplomatic outreach to other vegans, because I always felt that it's not necessarily wrong how you're not very diplomatic.
Yeah. All right.
And this contributed to your ostracizing from the vegan community.
Yeah. I mean,
it made it a lot harder for you to work, do anything meaningful.
Sure. I mean, I think that's not really right on topic with this message, but I think you might just be choosing not to mention the extent to which the alienation is mutual, right? So
I mean, because you talked about vegan activism in a very negative light.
Yes.
And this experience might have been shaped by your approach and.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
The views you held, especially.
Right. Okay. But look, it's not the case that I wanted to spend my time at an animal sanctuary cleaning up poo from horses and sheep. Okay. I don't want to. So, I never even applied for that. And both in terms of fundraising and the number of hours that go into vegan activism, that's probably the dominant discourse in vegan activism, is doing fundraising for animal sanctuaries and then spending your time and money at animal sanctuaries helping animals. So it's not the case that I criticized that and then regretted eroding the basis for me to participate, right? There's only one. I think I only need to use maybe 2 or 3 examples here. Okay, it's not the case that I wanted to stand silently on the street wearing a mask, holding a sign, but that I lost my opportunity to do that because I came on YouTube and discussed and criticized that method of activism, right? So again, the point is, I did not want to be part of a movement based on animal rescue and sanctuaries. And I explained the reasons why, which, by the way, includes cost. It's very expensive to keep one horse or to keep one pig. You'd be amazed. There are other reasons, too, ethically. I won't get into in this video, but I really don't believe in basically keeping animals on a farm in captivity. It's no different from a petting zoo. This is, to me, ethically, it doesn't make sense. What they're trying to do with these so-called sanctuaries. So it's not the case that this was something I desired, but that I was alienated from due to a lack of diplomacy. This is something I rejected, and that is really integral to my involvement with veganism, and that I would have rejected whether or not I openly said I rejected it, and would have been alienated from. So, I mean, in a sense, that's just saying it's not a communication problem. It's a real, genuine problem. It's a real, genuine alienation. And now, is that true of everything in the vegan movement? Well, the few...
When there's something like the PCRM,
right, well,
work with them.
That was just to say, but I think that comes back to exactly what we're talking about here in this letter, right? Like, I'm not a surgeon. I'm not a dentist. I don't have any of the qualifications that would make it possible for me to cooperate with PCRM, or that would make them interested in collaborating with me. So there's elitism there that, in a sense, I respect. I don't just accept it. I respect it. Like, okay, so PCRM is a foundation by and for medical professionals. I'm not a medical doctor, so I can't really be involved with it. So yeah, I think that's exactly the other side of it, which is, again, parallel to what I was saying in this letter, that if you don't have really specific skills to offer, then what are your expectations of what are your expectations of what you can do for the movement, and also what the movement can do for you. They have to be downwardly adjusted. Yeah.
Well, I'm curious. Before you started and got into vegan activism, were you optimistic, and how were your expectations compared to now? Like.
So when I started the YouTube channel, the YouTube channel's name is Chinese, and it's Heijin Zhengzhe, right? So the URL for the channel is YouTube/Heijin Zhengzhe, right? So I wanted to do an Asian politics channel. That was the original plan for à-bas-le-ciel, for this YouTube channel. I didn't want to do vegan activism at all. And I just relocated from Taiwan. And of course, I planned it before I did. I moved back from Taiwan to British Columbia and enrolled in an Asian Studies program to do politics of Asia. I never met one other person who was interested in politics of Asia. So it was really a disappointment with my contemporaries. Now, I did meet at least one other vegan activist. I met other vegan activists. Veganism became... look, the channel was never supposed to be a veganism channel. It's supposed to be a channel about my life. And it's very peculiar that vegan activism took over the content of the channel to such a large extent. But it's still true. I just did a bunch of videos talking about my relationship with my girlfriend and dating advice, and it still is a channel about my life. I did videos talking about job applications, job interviews back when I was doing that. I did videos about joining the army back when I applied to join the army. So that's still broadly true. So yeah, no, it's a totally fair question, but that's the really honest answer. Was that this wasn't a plan to launch myself into vegan activism. And, okay, was I optimistic? Was I optimistic for vegan activism? I think we should be able to do a fundraiser to illustrate and publish the storybook I wrote, which is vegan propaganda as a children's storybook. It is. It's artful, but it is ultimately to support veganism. That I want to be optimistic about. That should be possible. Beyond that, am I optimistic about... Look, there was another channel, a competitor of mine, who was on Patreon doing fundraising, and he said, for every $5 you donate, I will convert one person to veganism. So, am I optimistic like that? Like if people donate $500 to me, I can convert? No. In that sense, no. I was never optimistic. Was I optimistic about creating a new foundation in Canada that would really be durable or something like that? I've said this in the past. The future of veganism is not going to be one foundation, like one PCRM. It's going to be 2, 3, 5, many PCRMs, 200 PCRMs. We need a lot of specialized small organizations just to deal with specific issues like leather. We can look at one issue, even just the leather industry polluting rivers, dealing with these specific issues from a vegan perspective in a thoroughgoing way. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I was optimistic that I could meet and cooperate with 5 to 15 other people and create specialized agencies, ultimately for political lobbying, public outreach, and education. Yes, that I was optimistic about.
And even this expectation hasn't got realized.
No.
Okay.
It's totally, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the
picture.
Sure.
It's a very big picture.
No, but look, I just want to relate this answer to the answer to your earlier question. How do you meet those 15 people? Whether it's 5 or 15 people. How do you meet that small number of people? I do not believe I could meet them by coming on YouTube and bullshitting and pretending to be a bimbo and being like, oh, hey, wow, this is great. Everything going on in vegan is great. The type of person I wanted to meet was exactly the person you'd meet by coming on and saying, hey, look, this is what Direct Action Everywhere is doing. It's not good enough. Here's why. This is what's going on animal sanctuaries. It's not good enough. It's a waste of your time and money. Here's why. And that through that I could meet and connect with. Again, I'm not even talking about 1% of people. I'm talking about 5 or 15 people in total. Other people who are really serious and say, yeah, you know what? Let's get organized. Let's have this specialized group that just lobbies the government on public education for school children. Why are we promoting eggs and dairy in schools? Why are we telling children that cheese is healthy when we know cheese is unhealthy? Why isn't that illegal? It's illegal to tell children to smoke cigarettes. So why do you have propaganda in schools telling them to eat cheese or something? Or eggs for that matter, Those are specialized forms of advocacy. And yeah, I want to meet super cynical, well-informed people who want to get organized and do that. And I didn't think I'd arrive at that point by living a lie, So I don't. It's a totally valid question what you asked. Is the problem lack of diplomacy? But I don't think that's the problem. And again, there's another interesting question of who do you compare me to? Compare me to Vegan Gains. Who has less diplomacy? Me or Vegan Gains?
Of course, Vegan Gains.
Compare me to Gary Francione.
Okay.
Who has less diplomacy? Compare me to Gary Yourofsky. Who has less diplomacy? Suddenly, when you actually start comparing me to other, again, kind of aspiring leaders in the movement, actually, you seem to be way more diplomatic than these people. And I was dealing with much more serious and contentious issues, which includes, you may not remember this so long ago, but the dog castration issue. 50% of my audience quit in rage because I'm opposed to castrating dogs. That was amazingly controversial. That I'm vegan and I'm not going to lie to you and say castrating dogs is non-violent and non-harmful. And the dogs are happy to have their balls chopped off. And, it's ridiculous. That was controversial to an unbelievable extent. Yeah, this is the reality of veganism. So, would it be diplomatic to pretend that dog castration is okay? That petting zoos are okay, animal sanctuaries are okay? To pretend that you support forms of activism that you think are a joke, to pretend that James Aspey is intelligent, to pretend that James Aspey's Chinese tattoo makes sense and isn't horribly carved. Would it be more diplomatic? It might be, but I don't think it would serve my purpose. That I'm now. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Look, I hope it's interesting for you. One of the things I used to say on YouTube a lot, but now haven't said for a long time, is what made past tense vegan YouTube so fractious and contentious, made it so dramatic, was the fact that different people were playing different games by different rules. And they were always looking at each other with the expectation, you're going to play my game by my rules, right? You know, it's like you have one field and some people are playing baseball and some people are playing soccer. No, you can't kick the ball, you know? And yeah, for sure. I mean, some people were like Gary Yourofsky. Some people were advocating violence. Some people were advocating terrorism. Gary Yourofsky's position was that the ALF, the Animal Liberation Front, that the ALF was not violent enough. That was his position. And when I started being involved in vegan activism, that was the main thing I was opposing, was the glorification and glamorization of violence. And, you know, so you have this spectrum, and Freely the Banana Girl selling you, you know, youth and beauty and weight loss and so on. There are all these different approaches. Yeah.
But do you think this fractured scene of the vegan community, do you think this is a function, an intrinsic factor that attracts certain personalities that are too diametrically opposed or too eccentric to work together or to cooperate? Or do you think it's not necessarily something intrinsic in the kind of personality that the vegan message attracts?
So we went to a magazine shop yesterday here in Germany, and on the shelf of the magazine shop there were 5 vegan magazines. It filled a whole shelf, and they all have really boring names. One is Vegan World, Vegan. I could get the photograph to tell you the actual titles. There were 5 different full color, glossy vegan magazines, and they're all boring. They have nothing to say. It's exactly the most boring crap. So I'm answering your question. You know, does veganism have to be internecine and fractious and fragmentary and have this internal conflict? No. The majority of veganism is a boring, corporate, for-profit part of consumer culture. It's producing new snacks and new recipes and new diets and new yoga advice. It is just as boring as any other fashion magazine. I think all 5 magazines, none of them had anything political. None of them had anything ethical.
Yeah.
You know, broadly
Even
speaking.
fashion, like vegan fashion was covered in some of them.
Right, yeah, right. Right, no, I mean, look, and I'm not saying that shouldn't exist. No. But it's a contrast. Like, it's a contrast, just what you're saying. I totally what you're saying. You're talking about it as a self-evident fact that veganism is really contentious and internally divided.
But that shows that it's somewhat mainstream.
Right.
Can be potentially mainstream. Yeah.
No, right. No, but I mean, the other reality being, it reflects which part of veganism you're looking at. Because you're not looking at veganism on that store shelf. You're not looking at the corporate, for-profit, you know, boring mainstream element. I mean, it's not even like united. There's nothing to unite. You know what I mean? It's so... And of course, I mean, in both cases, money is a huge motivating factor. The aspect of veganism that's hyper-fragmented and mutually critical, motivated by money. If once you take on that horse, you got that horse and that pig on that animal sanctuary, and you're spending all your time getting on the phone and sending out mails and quote-unquote tabling, setting up tables for fundraising and doing auctions and charity fundraising, all you're trying to do is make your targets so that you can pay the veterinary bills to keep that horse alive. So that horse can stand there in a wooden shack, the same as any other farm, but you call it a sanctuary.
Well, like how DXC's strategy changed.
Yes.
When they wanted to now do more open rescue because they realized that this is the best source of money. It's the best source of funding to continue what they want to do.
I think the sickest part is that they don't admit that. They should just talk about it openly.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's completely right that DXC, Direct Action Everywhere, they transformed their methods and their fundraising and everything. Ultimately, because they saw what got them headlines, what got them donations, and they changed their whole methodology. They threw out everything they swore they'd abide by forever, you know, for money. That's my. They will never say that, of course.
Eating the lessons of social science.
Well, and I mean, the exceptions only prove the rule. I pointed this out. Gary Yourofsky, his whole career, you can follow the money. It's not hard to Google around and see who paid for what. Even though that's donation driven, it's still economic. There's still an economy of donations. Sure. But look, when I was involved in Buddhism as a Buddhist intellectual, were there 5, 10, or 15 Buddhist intellectuals who could be my equal, be my contemporary? No. No. That's my honest conclusion. And there are similar kinds of boundaries here, like admitting to yourself that the animal sanctuary thing is a scam, right? Like, that's hard to admit to yourself, especially if you committed the time and money to shoveling that poo and keeping that horse alive, if you put that in to stop and take a step back and say, what we're doing here is farming. This is the same as a farm in every way, except there's no slaughterhouse. And ultimately you still have to kill the animals. Sooner or later, the horse has to be put down. Right. And you tell yourself you're not the same as another farmer. You're the same as a petting zoo, whatever. Petting zoos also kill the animals.
Not left to die of natural causes?
No, there's no wilderness. Huh? Well, no, sorry, really briefly, let's not digress this. You have a horse, so you have an old horse, an old nag that's gradually dying, then it breaks a leg.
Okay.
You shoot it in the head. Or what? Or you sit there and look at the bill. You think it's even possible? Do you think there even is a vet who's going to be like, okay, we can amputate the leg and give this horse a prosthetic leg, and it's a huge amount of money. And then every day you're going to need to take it to physiotherapy and try to get it to walk. A horse with a broken leg is a dead horse. And all these animals, they constantly have parasites and their organs, and they live in captivity. They live many, many years past their maximum lifespan in the wild. So inevitably, they're put down.
Right.
Whether you do it with a rifle or with poison or whatever.
Yeah, I know this is a different topic as pets. I know it's different than having an animal sanctuary, but of course both of the cats that I had lived way longer than a natural life expectancy for a cat.
Right.
And we had to put both of them down at separate times, of course. Right. But it was just the signs of old age and a house cat,
the kidneys stop working and all that stuff.
Yeah, cancer. I mean, that's what happens with most animals if you live past a certain age.
Sure. So, and there are no-kill shelters that commit to paying for surgery every time the animals get cancer, and that's a joke too. So you can see how that story plays out. And but with your cats, you had to make that decision sooner or later. Yeah. When do we stop? With humans, you have to, but it's a little bit different. Yeah. Humans get to make the decision too for the death. Yeah. Sorry, but this was a digression. What was I in the middle of saying there? So I was only...
When you're the person who's actually working
on
the same...
So I was mentioning this, thank you, babe.
Stepping back.
It's hard to admit to yourself this is a waste of money, or just to admit to yourself this is never going to accomplish the goals of the vegan movement. This is not moving us closer to our goals, right? And in other cases, it's admitting this is not moving us forward effectively. Putting people in prison doing illegal activities is not effective. It's also immoral. I'm against it for other reasons. If you live in a democracy, don't go to jail for symbolic acts of protest. It's ridiculous. Anyway, sorry, but various groups endorse that kind of illegal activity. So admitting that to yourself, that what you've been doing and making sacrifices is hard. Likewise, in Buddhism, there are these kinds of hard limits. How many intellectuals are there in Buddhism who've done the research and who've done the reading, who had the level of commitment to the religion or culture or area of study to really know their stuff, but who can still admit to themselves, you know what? Meditation, it's no better than prayer. It's not. All of this science about meditation is bullshit. You know what? In Christianity and Judaism, they have hell. In Buddhism, we also have heaven and hell. They're a little different. Like the specific types of torture used are different, but it's not better. Like, if we criticize the Christians and Muslims for believing in hell, then that criticism applies to us also, right? I could get into the technical differences between the Buddhist version of hell and the Christian version of hell. In Buddhist hell, you're tortured by giant trees with enormous needles. Some other things you don't have in Christian Jewish hell, but it's still torture. There are still demons torturing you, by the way, in hell. It's not that. So my point is that it's not that there are no intelligent people in veganism or no intelligent people in Buddhism. But these lines that alienate me from the other stuff going on in the scene, yeah, I mean, they're meaningful to me. And I think the exclusion is mutual, right? Like the people within Buddhism who really believe in and really preach, like people who go into a cancer ward and try to teach people dying of cancer how to do meditation. You know, it's no different from teaching people prayer, you know. When they go in and tell them, oh no, this meditation, they may tell them it heals them, it may tell them it'll just help them endure pain better, but you know, they may actually be promising them miracles. That goes on. I'm not going to collaborate with those people. And again, you get into these kind of fine moral differences. Where do you draw the line politically? Where does it become impossible for me to cooperate with someone else? And obviously, what we've all been seeing in the last 5 years is how fine the line is where other people won't cooperate with me.
Yeah.
But these same people, they will cooperate with Durian Rider. They will cooperate with Vegan Gains. They will cooperate with Gary Francione and Gary Yourofsky. They will cooperate with people who are actually way more offensive and politically noxious than I am. Some of them will cooperate with Ask Yourself, you know. Yeah, but I just say, so you see, this is almost an affirmation that the lines I'm drawing, they are pretty important demarcations.
Yeah, I don't know what the original email was from, you know, what was said, or if this person is really planning on becoming a full-time activist. But, I mean, a question for you is, do you think, with this current state of vegan activism, do you think we need more activists? It kind of seems like, you know, I've read a couple articles lately that just say, you know, if you want to hear convincing arguments for veganism, you can look up Earthling Ed, you can look up James Aspie, or, you know, do we need more people doing this kind of activism? What we do need, in my opinion, are people like you say that are motivated to get the dairy and egg propaganda out of school, you know, out of the school, or more people that are motivated in this way. But in that case, if we need more people involved doing this kind of work, who are those kinds of people, and who is able to do this as their job? You know, in your message, you mentioned a couple that wanted to move to, I'm not sure which country, but you know, they wanted to spend their retirement. So an older couple, and so part of my first reaction is to say, oh, we need more people who are in retirement age, people who don't need to depend on this for their living, because what money is in it? If it's just a charity, if it's just people are only donating because they care about a certain cause or a certain issue. So yeah, I don't know. Like, who do you think? And what percentage of vegans are actually at that age? I think it's mostly a younger generation that cares about this, and you know.
Right, and that's also a difference with gay rights, by the way. So when the gay rights movement came out, even though it may be that the most visible people who were on the covers of magazines were young and attractive, there were always elderly gay people. They might not be as photogenic, but I just say homosexuals, statistically, there's the same number of them in every generation. So there was a constituency for gay rights, evenly distributed at all levels of income, rich and poor, evenly distributed from elderly to young, even though obviously the older ones would be more in the closet and whatever. So that's very, very different from veganism, where it's not just the tendency to focus on people who are young and attractive, but where actually the numbers are disproportionately the young and not the old. It's a big strategic difference between us and gay rights, us and a lot of kind of minority movements. But look, you know, we need more of everything. I mean, you know this. Because unlike gay rights was to serve a minority of people who plan to remain a small minority of people. Our plan is to become the majority. And when you really think about that, you know, and then you think about the people who won't reply to my emails, you know what I mean? And including, I talked to this one foundation recently who have a lot of money, and they can't even get 300 views on a YouTube video. And that's their main form of activism. And like, you know, some of their YouTube videos, 50 views, like 30 views, like really, really, really low. And I wrote to them and I said, well, look, I was writing to you asking for your help, but I'm in a position to help you. Like, you know, like I can give you 2,000 viewers, and they're some of the most cynical, best informed viewers. You know, stuff whatever. when you think about it, like, okay, this is our plan, is to expand and become the majority. And, well, Gary Francione himself, wouldn't return my emails. I have talked to him. We had just a couple messages back and forth on Facebook back in the day. But, the level of cooperation, the extent to which mutual hostility makes any kind of cooperation impossible, it's laughable. And the whole world is laughing at us. Freely was laughable. Durian Rider was laughable. Vegan Gains still is laughable, etc. The kind of public faces. Gary Yourofsky, laughable. I'm just saying. And yeah, there's a sense in which we're still laughing. So, but look, the other question you asked, you kind of rolled on from one question. One question was, do we need more activists? And I'm going to tell you, if you want to become the majority, we need more of everything. We even need more people like Freely. We need more bikini models. We need more of everything. If we're going to be the majority by the year 2100 or something, then we need more of everything. But then the second question is, what kind of people do we need? And the real answer is, these people are going to choose themselves, right? And that is both the triumph and the tragedy of it. When I started doing humanitarian work in Laos, I spoke to several Lao people who had this unbelievably positive view of white Europeans and white Americans. Unbelievably positive. Now, Laos is a country that was destroyed by white people. It was destroyed first by the French Empire and then by the American Empire, to make a long story short. And so I talked to them a bit, like, why do they have this really positive opinion? Well, it's because every single white person they'd ever known was like a surgeon who volunteered to come and help the poor in a small village in Laos, or an agricultural technician who came to help them, irrigate a field and alleviate starvation in a valley. They were these extraordinary humanitarian volunteer type people who personally made sacrifices to come to Laos and try to do something positive to make the world a better place. That was the side of white people or white Western culture and civilization they knew. They didn't know the type of American who flew a bomber aircraft and destroyed their country, or the type of American who voted for it and wanted it and made that decision, and the political machinations behind that, and the CIA and the White House. That's not what they knew. They knew this kind of unbelievably flattering side of white Western culture and civilization. And the couple of people I'm thinking of, that's what they thought we were all like. That's who they think we are. They've probably met 30 or 40 people like that. It's not just a few. That's the segment of our culture and society. Those people choose themselves. They elect themselves. And sometimes the people who choose themselves are completely inadequate for the task they've taken on. They completely lack the competence they should have. And I'd say that with no hesitation about James Aspey. I'd say that with no hesitation about Gary Yourofsky. I think they're terrible representatives for veganism. Terrible. And sometimes it's someone who is an okay representative. Dr. McDougall is not perfect or something. But, sure, Dr. McDougall or, got positive leanings towards, some of these guys. They're not all bad. Bit eccentric, but, All right, guys, that's a good place to wrap it up. Long story short,
I think so.
No hope.
No. Just hope the right people choose themselves to be involved in vegan activism.
You know my catchphrase. This is not something that's for everybody, but if not you, then who?